Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at the RTX 3060 Ti. Specific model I have here is this EVGA model. They're for the Win 3 Ultra Gaming. The RTX 3060 Ti came out at an MSRP of $400. This specific card I have here is at $449. After tax and shipping, you're paying around $483 for this graphics card. With the For the Win 3, you're getting extra cooling and a higher base clock and boost clock, easier overclock ability. So that's what you're paying for, but it's going to be up to you whether or not it's worth paying so much more, almost $30 less than what you can get an RTX 3070 for. But this RTX 3060 Ti doesn't really slot far behind that RTX 3070, so it's still a very comparable and great card. A lot of the earlier reviewers that came out with the RTX 3060 Ti graphics card reviews are comparing it to the RTX 2080 Super, saying that this new graphics card is about 5% faster than that 2080 Super, which means that this $400 graphics card is going to be a great entry-level option for anyone trying to get into 1440p gaming, light on the 4K gaming, but if anyone is trying to get into that 240 Hz 1080p gaming, then this is going to be a great graphics card for you as well. Now in this video, I'm only testing 1440p resolution. I've tested several games with RTX and without RTX, also with the DLSS. Now the RTX 3060 Ti, this specific model is at 285 millimeters in length. It's a 2-slot graphics card with 3 display ports and 1 HDMI port. It also has 2 8-pin power connectors. It's very comparable to my RTX 2080 Ti, also from EVGA. Just maybe a little bit longer, but that RTX 2080 Ti is a 3-slot graphics card. This does have the triple fan cooling, the ICX3 EVGA is known for. This card also supports PCI Express 4.0, and just another reminder to anyone who's still confused about that, you do not need a PCI Express 4.0 motherboard to use this graphics card. This graphics card will slot in and work on a PCI Express 3.0 motherboard. You just won't get that extra bandwidth that PCI Express 4.0 offers. And a lot of people have already shown that the extra bandwidth in PCI Express 4.0 doesn't make a difference in gaming performance. The RTX 3060 Ti does have 4,864 CUDA cores, has a boost clock of 1800 MHz, and has 8 GB of GDDR6 memory. So a lot of those games that require lots of VRAM, such as Resident Evil 3, Doom Eternal, Call of Duty Cold War, Call of Duty Warzone, etc., you're not going to have really any issues with this 8 GB of VRAM. It also comes with great bandwidth support as well. Along with those specs, the RTX 3060 Ti comes with the plethora of different features that Nvidia has been offering lately, such as the RTX Voice, DLSS, and ray tracing, and then also Nvidia Reflex, which I still have yet to notice any difference in my gaming while using that and enabling that. But nonetheless, it's a great idea. I am soon going to be going into the benchmarks for the games. I have several games where I tested with RTX on, RTX off, with DLSS, not DLSS, and I'll have those all in the charts for you guys, and you can make up your mind whether or not ray tracing has been worth it lately. I think with multiplayer games, no matter what graphics card you have, it's better to have ray tracing disabled. DLSS is a great feature, especially with DLSS 2.0. Definitely helps, especially in competitive games, and it's an absolute requirement when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into those benchmarks, and we'll see how this RTX 3060 Ti stacks up, and then I will come back and give you my thoughts on this graphics card. Alright guys, with these benchmarks we're going to start off at Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. All of these games were tested at 1440p resolution, some of them with multiple different settings, so I am going to go over each individual setting if the game was tested with different settings. And with Black Ops Cold War, this did get tested with multiple settings in regards to DLSS and ray tracing. So starting off here with the Ultra preset and RTX being off, we had an average frame rate of 87.8 frames per second with 1% lows of 28.8. Next, with ultra settings and RTX on, no DLSS, we had an average frame rate of 58.2 and 1% lows of 31. And then also with Cold War, we had ultra settings with RTX on and then DLSS on the quality preset. We had an average frame rate of 78.9 and 1% lows of 43.1. And then if you go to ultra settings with RTX turned off and then DLSS on quality, we had an average frame rate of 112.5 and 1% lows of 31.8. Now we have Cyberpunk 2077, also tested with multiple different settings. First one here with RTX on and then DLSS on quality, we had an average frame rate of 49.1 and 1% lows of 29.0 and 1% lows of 29. Next, with RTX off and DLSS on quality, we had an average frame rate of 57.8 and 1% lows of 44.9. And this was on the Ultra setting preset. And I did not test it with RTX on without DLSS because even with my 2080 Ti, that was unplayable. So in this game, you do have to have DLSS on pretty much at all times, even if you're not using ray tracing. Next up, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and these were also on Ultra presets. First one here with ray tracing on and DLSS turned off. You have an average frame rate of 50 frames per second with 1% lows of 30.2. Next, with ray tracing on and DLSS on, you had average frame rate of 58.8 and 1% lows of 32.7. And then with ray tracing turned off and DLSS turned off, you had an average frame rate of 82.6 frames per second and 1% lows of 39. And then ray tracing turned off and DLSS turned on, you had an average frame rate of 84.9 and 1% lows of 39.4. Next up, we have Gears of War 5, and this was at Ultra presets, and average frame rate was 78.6 and 1% lows of 39.6. Next up with Doom Eternal, Next up with Doom Eternal, Ultra Nightmare settings, we have an average frame rate of 125.4 and 1% lows of 86.4. Now, with PUBG at the highest possible settings, we had an average frame rate of 132.1 and 1% lows of 89.1. And then Rainbow Six Siege tested on the Vulkan API and very high settings. We had an average frame rate of 221.1 frames per second and 1% lows of 167.3. Next up, we have FarCry 5 at Ultra settings. Average frame rate was 95.4 and 1% lows of 54. Now, with Red Dead Redemption 2, we have Ultra presets on DirectX 12. Everything is Ultra. MSAA is at 4x. We had the average frame rate of 35.8 and 1% lows of 29.7. If you lower it to high settings on DirectX 12, still MSAA at 4x, we had an average frame rate of 56.9 and 1% lows of 44.3. Next up, we have Counter-Strike Global Offensive, tested at high settings. We had an average frame rate of 356.3 frames per second and 1% lows of 151.6 frames per second. And then another esports title, we have Valorant, also tested at high settings. And we had an average frame rate of 371.8 frames per second and 1% lows of 169.2. Next up, we have one of my favorite games. It's an indie title, World War II shooter called Hell Let Loose. This was tested at epic settings, had an average frame rate of 71.3 and 1% lows of 42.5. Next up, now we have Assassin's Creed Valhalla, tested on the Ultra presets. We had an average frame rate of 62.8 and 1% lows of 46.2. All right, now I did do some ray tracing testing on Fortnite and some without. I have just a couple here, but we're gonna start off first without ray tracing on epic settings. We have an average frame rate of 104.9 frames per second and 1% lows of 80.5. Also with Fortnite, if you go down to the pro competitive settings, and that's with the view distance on epic, I have shadows on medium and everything else low. We had an average frame rate of 276.7 and then 1% lows of 132.5. And then if you go to RTX on and Epic Everything, you'd get an average frame rate of 17 frames a second and 1% lows of 14.6. And then if you were to keep the RTX on and then play on competitive settings, you'd get an average frame rate of 19.1 and 1% lows of 12.5. If you keep it on competitive settings and turn on ray tracing and then have DLSS on quality, you would have an average frame rate of 35.8 and 1% lows of 30. And then also keeping it at competitive settings, RTX on, but increase the DLSS to performance mode, you'd get an average frame rate of 54.6 and 1% lows of 42.2. If you were to tweak some of the if you were to tweak and turn off some of the RTX settings, they do have like all 3 RTX settings: global illumination, reflections, and lighting and shadows, all in Fortnite. And if you turn all of them on, that's where you get that 17 frames per second. But if you were to turn some of those off and then only have some of them that matter to you on low, you can get a playable frame rate. But I don't have the time to go through every single setting on Fortnite. All right, next up is Wolfenstein Youngblood, and this one is all tested on the LabX built-in benchmark. First setting here is with ray tracing turned on with no DLSS, and average frame rate for that is 96.6 and 1% lows of 77.6. And Youngblood was also tested on the highest possible settings, which is, I think it's called like Mindleben. So yes, it's on the ultra settings for Youngblood in all of these tests. Next up, with ray tracing turned on and DLSS with quality, you'd get an average frame rate of 138 and 1% lows of 105.4. Next up is if you were to have RTX turned off and no DLSS, you'd have an average frame rate of 169.4 and 1% lows of 127.9. And then again with ray tracing turned off, but if you turn on DLSS with quality mode, you'd get an average frame rate of 189.7 and 1% lows of 138.9. All right, and now finally we have Watch Dogs Legion, also tested at the highest ultra settings, but we did test different RTX settings here. First setting here is with ray tracing on ultra and DLSS off. We have an average frame rate there of 28.8 frames per second and 1% lows of 22.5. Next, if you turn ray tracing off and have no DLSS, we'd have an average frame rate of 60.2 frames per second and 1% lows of 49.2. And then with ray tracing off and DLSS on quality, we'd have an average frame rate of 76.7 frames per second and 1% lows of 62.5. And then with ray tracing on ultra and DLSS on quality, it would have an average frame rate of 51.1 frames per second and a 1% low of 29.2. And then with ray tracing on ultra, DLSS on performance, you'd get an average frame rate of 63.6 and 1% lows of 51.6. If you tune down to RTX on high and DLSS on quality, you give it an average frame rate of 54.1 frames per second and 1% lows of 44.9. All right, guys, let me know down in the comments what you think of those benchmarks. Are you going to try and get one of these RTX 3060 Ti's once they become available? And will you be using it for 1440p or 1080p? Or are you one of those high-class 4K gamers? I want to know down in the comments, so leave all the comments you want. Make comments about ray tracing, DLSS, anything that you want. I'd love to hear from you guys. For me, I think this is a nice entry level into 1440p gaming at $400, especially just a 5% boost over the 2080 Super that other reviewers have shown. And it really begs to question with this RTX 3060 Ti, what we should be doing for prices on the used market for those old RTX 20 series graphics cards. I think they're still at exorbitant amounts on eBay and Facebook Marketplace, etc. And I think something needs to be done about that. And I do plan on, I'm actually creating a little formula to try and figure out how much we should be spending on those old RTX 20 series graphics cards and older. For me, with the RTX 3060 Ti, ray tracing was a viable option in single-player games like Youngblood and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, as well as Cyberpunk 2077. but I don't foresee ever using it in multiplayer games like Call of Duty Cold War. And I don't think that's going to be an option for a lot of us that care about our FPS performance in multiplayer games. I don't think that ray tracing is a viable option for that. But with story modes like Wolfenstein Youngblood, Cyberpunk, all those single player games are going to benefit from the ray tracing as far as creating an immersive experience for anyone with a system that can handle it. But in Cyberpunk 2077, DLSS is a must, and that DLSS helps out a lot even if you're playing without ray tracing. With the features like ray tracing, deep learning super sampling, NVENC encoder for streamers and recorders, RTX voice, and reflex, Nvidia offers a competitive feature set for those that are in the market for a gaming graphics card. I have yet to get my hands on any of the new AMD graphics cards. That launch was a complete disaster, as well as this 30 series. So I'm not picking sides here. Both the Nvidia and the AMD releases have been just absolutely atrocious. This was the only 30 series card or new graphics card that came out this year in 2020 that I've been able to get my hands on. It's just been a terrible market right now, and I can't wait for 2020 to end. AMD has definitely stepped up their game, offering high-end graphics cards with that 6800 XT, 6800, and 6900 XT, which probably no one's going to be able to buy because they said right off the bat that it's going to be a limited release graphics card. So they have stepped it up with performance, and they're beating out the RTX 3080 and 3090 in several game titles with their new graphics cards, but they are lacking those features that Nvidia offers. And I think the most important one for a lot of people who are going into streaming is that NVENC encoder. So it's really going to be up to you which side you should be going with right now in the graphics cards. If you just want raw performance, price to performance, it looks like the RX 6800 XT might be the card to go with. But if you use your graphics card for anything other than gaming, it looks like Nvidia might be the way to go. And with a $400 RTX 3060 Ti, I think Nvidia is winning offering that type of card to people. Those are my off-the-cuff thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments about those. I think I'm going to wrap up this video. Just remember to leave your thoughts down in the comments about this graphics card and those benchmarks, whether or not this is a 1080p or 1440p graphics card. And if you guys want to see some overclocking, let me know down in the comments as well. We can go over whether or not paying that extra $50 price tag is worth it if you're going to be trying to overclock these RTX 3060 Ti's. See if we can even beat out an RTX 3070. But with that being said, thank you guys for coming in and watching this video. Remember to leave a like on your way out and a comment. Subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.